Why was her name missing from the mission list, when every beat of her heart told her she belonged there? The others shuffled papers, adjusted rifles, whispered over maps. The briefing room smelled of burnt coffee and old dust, the kind that clings to your uniform no matter how many times it's washed. She sat 3 chairs from the end, her boots steady on the floor, her eyes locked on the projection screen where the operations outline flickered under fluorescent light. Not once did the commander glance her way. Not once did her name leave his mouth. She told herself it was nothing, maybe an oversight, maybe she'd hear it in the final roll call. But the longer she waited, the tighter her jaw clenched. Her finger traced the corner of her notepad, dragging slow circles into the paper as if scratching deep enough might carve her name into the mission itself. They said this mission was decisive. One strike, one clean extraction, a window so narrow it felt like chance itself had opened it. And yet her role had been erased. No one looked at her, not really. The men in the room carried the weight of familiarity, old friendships forged in muddy trenches, shared cigarettes behind armored vehicles, jokes whispered in languages of survival. She had that too, in fragments. But her silence, her focus, her unflinching precision, those things didn't weave easily into the fabric of belonging. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped, boots thundered across concrete. Her own heartbeat was the loudest noise in her ears. No call for her, no assignment, just nothing. She didn't move, didn't follow the others. She stayed behind until the room emptied, the air shifting as if it exhaled relief in their absence. Only then did she whisper into the silence, "But you'll need me, you'll see." Her words were swallowed by the hum of the overhead projector. She stood stiff, her muscles tight as coiled wire. Walking out, she noticed the flicker of doubt in one soldier's eyes, a younger one, barely 20. He looked at her, then away, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. That hesitation cut deeper than open rejection. Outside, daylight hit her face, the kind of harsh sun that bleaches color from everything it touches. The camp buzzed with activity, radios chattered, trucks coughed black smoke, soldiers checked gear with the ritual of men convincing themselves of control. And she walked past them unnoticed, her mind elsewhere. She had joined this unit for one reason, a promise she couldn't break, even if it killed her. Somewhere beyond the hills and rivers of this country, beyond the crumbling villages and fractured roads, there was someone whose fate was tied to hers. This mission, even if not meant for her, carried threads of that truth. But they didn't know, they couldn't know. Not yet. That night she lay awake in her bunk, listening. Every sound drilled into her, boots on gravel, a distant dog barking, a truck engine turning over, the wind rattling loose tin. The barracks smelled of sweat and gun oil, familiar, grounding. But her chest felt hollow as though she were already elsewhere. She closed her eyes, seeing the mission she wasn't allowed to touch. The map burned into her brain, the coordinates, the objective, the faces of the men who would walk into it tomorrow. And one unspoken truth gnawed at her. They were going in blind. They didn't know the terrain like she did. They didn't understand the angles, the shifting winds, the way echoes could turn a sniper's bullet into a ghost's whisper. She did, she had studied it, trained for it. But her name had not been called. She turned on her side, pulling her blanket tighter, as though wrapping herself against the weight of exclusion. And yet, under that weight, a flame refused to go out. Morning came too soon. Boots stomped past her bunk, laughter in the distance, sharp and careless. She dressed quietly, tying her laces slow, measured. Her rifle case sat beneath the bed, closed, untouched since the briefing. Her fingers hovered over it before pulling away. Not yet. In the mess hall, trays clattered. The smell of powdered eggs clung heavy to the air. She moved through the line without speaking, without lifting her eyes. A voice from behind her muttered, low enough to sting but not loud enough for anyone else to hear. She wasn't even picked. What's she doing here? The words struck like shrapnel. She didn't turn. didn't react. She carried her tray, sat alone at the edge of the room, and ate with mechanical precision. But inside, the silence screamed. Later, she found herself at the range, not by order but by instinct. The weapon was an extension of her breath. Every shot was rhythm, release, and control. Dust rose with each echo. Brass casings glimmered briefly before dulling in the dirt. A shadow moved at her side. It was the young soldier from the briefing, the one who had looked away. He hesitated, then spoke. "They should have put you on it." Her hands paused, her breath steadied. He didn't wait for her reply, just kept talking, as if unburdening himself. "You're better than half of them, they know it. Everyone knows it, but you know how it is. Some doors don't open easy." She lowered the rifle, looked at him, really looked. His eyes carried that fragile thing soldiers tried to hide. Doubt, fear, the ache of carrying more than you're ready for. She wanted to tell him she understood. That doubt was an old companion. That fear never left, no matter how many missions you survived. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded once, a gesture more intimate than speech. He left without another word. She stared at the target through the scope. The circle, the red center, the imagined enemy. She fired again. The bullet cut dead through the middle. And yet her chest ached with something victory couldn't reach. That evening the unit prepared for departure. Gear was checked and rechecked, radios tested, maps folded into pockets like fragile secrets. The commander's voice echoed, hard and unbending, giving final instructions. She watched from the edge, a ghost in her own company. But ghosts don't stay silent forever. When the convoy rolled out, engines roaring into the dusk, she stood in their fatting dust. And as the sound of them disappeared into distance, she made her choice. Her rifle case was heavy in her hand. Her steps carried her not back to her bunk, but toward the dark hills, the same hills that cradled the mission no one had let her claim. Because destiny had already signed her name, and she wasn't about to erase it. The night swallowed her figure. One woman, walking toward a war she hadn't been invited to. One breath after another, one step after another. Her heart steady, her silence louder than any orders left behind. And in that silence, a storm was waiting to be born. How far could she go before someone noticed? The dust of the departing convoy still hung in the air, bitter in her throat, coating her tongue with the taste of absence. Engines faded into the horizon, a mechanical heartbeat growing weaker until silence reclaimed the night. She stood in that silence for a moment longer than necessary, as if weighing it, testing it. Her boots began to move. Every step was a quiet rebellion. The rifle case pressed into her hand, heavy but familiar. Her pack pulled at her shoulders, straps biting through fabric. She had taken nothing more than what she knew she needed. Water, ammo, a map folded with care, a compass that clicked when opened, a knife that carried more memory than steel. The base grew smaller behind her, swallowed by shadows. The floodlights that had seemed so bright minutes ago now looked fragile, almost desperate, like artificial stars trying to hold back the night. She didn't look back. The hills ahead rose black against the horizon. The mission lay beyond them, somewhere between dust and fire. The convoy had speed, engines, headlights cutting swathes through darkness. She had silence, patience, and the instinct of someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to be seen was not to be seen at all. The ground was uneven, loose stones shifting underfoot. She adjusted her pace, low, deliberate, her breath controlled. Every sound of the night amplified: insects, a distant owl, the dry whisper of wind scraping over grass. She listened more than she moved, her body tuned to silence the way others tune to music. Somewhere ahead, the convoy's rumble dipped and faded. She imagined them stopping to check coordinates, imagined the commander's sharp voice cutting through static. They had no idea she was behind them, no idea she was threading her shadow through their path. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about something else, something heavier. Her hand brushed her pocket, feeling the worn edge of a folded photograph. She didn't take it out, not yet, but its presence steadied her, reminded her why she was here. Because the mission's target, the man whose name had been written in whispers across intelligence reports, wasn't just another ghost on a wanted list. He was flesh, blood, and memory. And years ago, he had stolen something from her that could never be replaced. They thought this mission was strategic, tactical, a matter of territory. For her, it was personal. The night deepened. The stars were sharp above, cold and unblinking. Clouds moved slow like smoke. She moved faster, closing distance, every muscle alive with urgency. Then a sound. Not the convoy, not machinery, closer, sharper, the click of a safety being switched off. She froze, lowered herself to the ground, the earth cold against her chest. Her eyes scanned the dark. Nothing moved, nothing but shadows shifting. Her pulse slowed, but not from calm, from focus. A voice broke the silence, low, guttural, in a language she didn't fully understand but recognized enough. A command. Figures emerged, 4 of them, silhouettes carrying rifles, moving in a staggered line across the ridge. Not allies, not her unit. Scouts, perhaps, sentinels of the very place the convoy was heading into. She pressed herself flatter, the earth rough against her cheek. Her breath shallow, measured, barely stirring dust. The men passed within 20 meters. Their boots crunched on gravel. One stopped, bent to adjust his strap, his head turning briefly toward her position. For a second too long, she thought his eyes had caught something, a glint, a shape, the unnatural curve of shadow. Her fingers tightened on her rifle case. Not yet. He moved on. Their voices faded into the night, swallowed by distance. She exhaled slowly, her chest burning from restraint. The truth settled hard inside her. The unit didn't know. They didn't know the enemy had spread scouts further than the intel suggested. They were walking into a net, blind. She pushed up from the dirt, wiping grit from her cheek with the back of her hand. Every instinct screamed to move faster now, to close the gap before it was too late. Her legs obeyed. The terrain cut sharper as she advanced. Jagged rocks jutted like broken teeth. Dry brush scratched at her boots. The path grew narrow, forcing her to shift her weight carefully, every step a negotiation between silence and speed. She thought of the younger soldier's words at the range. Some doors don't open easy. He was right. This one had stayed shut her entire career. But now she wasn't asking. She wasn't knocking. She was walking straight through. And if the cost was exile, punishment, disgrace, so be it. Better that than to stay behind while others walked blind into death. Hours blurred, the stars shifted. Her body ached with effort, but her mind was sharper than ever. Fatigue was an old enemy, one she knew how to tame with breath and rhythm. Then finally, faint on the wind, the growl of engines. She slowed, crouching low against a ridge, her eyes scanning the valley below. The convoy had stopped. Trucks lined the narrow dirt road, headlights dimmed, soldiers spilling out, their voices hushed but urgent. They moved with ritual efficiency, checking perimeters, adjusting gear. From her vantage, she could see further than they could. She could see the way the land curved ahead, funneling into a choke point. She could see shadows shifting where no patrol should be. And she could see, through the faint glimmer of moonlight, the telltale glint of metal. Mines. They didn't know. She gripped the earth tight in her fist, nails cutting into dirt. Every fiber in her screamed to shout, to warn them, but a voice inside held her back. If she revealed herself now, the commander would order her back. Chain of command was iron. They'd send her away, no matter what she'd seen. She couldn't risk that. Instead, she shifted her rifle into position, sliding the bolt open with practiced silence. The scope caught moonlight, then focused, framing the valley's hidden truths in its glass eye. There, a figure crouched near the choke point, working methodically, planting. She drew breath steady, slow. The crosshairs hovered. Her finger curled. One shot cracked through the night. Echoes rolled across the valley. Birds scattered from trees. Soldiers below froze, heads snapping toward the sound. The figure near the choke point collapsed. The others scattered, shouting, scrambling into cover. The convoy roared alive, soldiers shouting, engines revving, orders cracking through radios. The ambush was sprung too soon, the enemy exposed before the trap could close. And from her hidden perch, she watched the chaos unfold, unseen, unknown. She had just changed the course of the mission with a single bullet. But she couldn't reveal herself, not yet. Because this was only the beginning. And somewhere deeper in that valley, past the choke point, past the chaos, was the man whose shadow had lived inside her for years. The one who had stolen her brother's life. The one she had sworn in silence to find. The mission wasn't written for her, but destiny had already signed her name in blood. What happens when one shot saves lives, but no one knows who pulled the trigger? The valley erupted in confusion. Shouts tangled with the grinding roar of engines, boots slamming against dirt, the metallic clatter of weapons pulled from straps. Soldiers fanned out from the convoy, some dropping to prone positions, others darting toward cover that barely existed in the sparse terrain. Radio static buzzed sharp across the night air. Orders snapped out, tense and brittle. The commander's voice cut through. Hold formation, secure the perimeter, sweep the choke point. But already gunfire answered. Muzzle flashes flared from the darkness ahead. The ambush had been forced early and the enemy wasn't ready, but they were many, too many. From her ridge she watched through the scope, her pulse steady, her breath deliberate. Each squeeze of the trigger was an act of both control and release. One figure dropped near the rocks. Another tried to flank, caught in her glass crosshairs before he could fire. The scope flickered with each kill, but her body stayed still as stone. No one below looked up. No one wondered about the unseen guardian at their back. She let them think it was their formation, their luck, their training. The convoy pressed forward, soldiers advancing with careful bursts of fire, sweeping toward the choke point where moments ago death had waited disguised as earth. Now it was only bodies and broken intent. Still, she did not move from her perch. Because the fight was not over. From the corner of her scope she saw it, a glimmer deeper in the valley, tucked into shadow. The real nest. The ones who had waited for the first clash to draw blood before spilling the rest. She shifted her aim, slow, deliberate. But before she could fire, a voice, faint, memory-wrapped, rose unbidden inside her head. It was his voice. Her brother. You never miss, do you? Even when we were kids. Stones, bottles, cans on the fence, you always hit dead center. The sound wasn't real, couldn't be. He was gone. Years gone, but memory isn't polite, it doesn't wait for silence. It comes when it wants, sharp and merciless. Her chest tightened just for a moment. And the valley snapped her back with the crack of incoming fire. Bullets chewed into the rocks near her ridge, shards slicing the air. She rolled instinctively, hugging ground, crawling toward a different position. The enemy had spotted her muzzle flash. They knew someone else was out here. Her breath came fast now, but her mind remained cold. She crawled along the ridge, found new cover, raised her rifle again. The nest came into focus. 3 men with rifles. One crouched over a radio, voice urgent. She steadied her aim. Fired. The radio fell silent. Below, her unit surged, pressing through the choke point now cleared. They didn't know why the radio had gone dark. Didn't know who had kept the larger ambush from descending. They only knew momentum had tilted back toward them. Still, the gunfire continued. Still, shadows moved where eyes could not easily see. And above it all, she remained invisible. Invisible but not untouched. Her brother's face wouldn't leave her. Not the way he looked the last time she saw him, alive, laughing, brushing dust from his hair after a patrol, but the way he had looked in the photo they'd handed her, folded neat and cruel inside an envelope. Still, broken, drained of everything that made him her brother. The same enemy responsible was out there tonight, not just faceless silhouettes, a man, a name. He had ordered the ambush that killed her brother's unit, had slipped away while others bled into sand. And now, after years of chasing, intelligence said he was here, hiding deeper inside this valley, shielded by layers of men who would die for him. Her unit thought this was just another raid. For her it was justice, or vengeance. Sometimes she couldn't tell the difference. The firefight thinned. Echoes stretched longer between bursts. Smoke drifted low, mixing with dust, carried by wind that chilled as the night deepened. The convoy reassembled, soldiers gathering, checking wounds, patching the broken edges of order. She stayed where she was, eyes watching, scope scanning. One of the medics moved fast between bodies, kneeling, pressing hands into wounds, his own face streaked with mud and sweat. She recognized him, Ortiz. A quiet man, always sketching in a worn notebook during downtime, drawing faces instead of writing letters. He stopped suddenly over one body, his hands frozen in place, a sound breaking from him that was almost a sob. The man on the ground whispered something. Ortiz bent low, pressing closer, desperate. She looked away. Moments like that, too human, too raw, were harder to watch than bullets. But she couldn't soften, not now. She adjusted her scope again, scanning the tree line further up. A flicker of movement. She tracked it. Two figures slipping away into deeper shadows, carrying something heavy. It wasn't retreat. It was movement, purposeful, leading somewhere. Her chest tightened. Instinct told her what the map already had. The objective lay in that direction. The man she sought was still ahead. Her hand brushed her pocket again, fingertips pressing into the folded photograph. She almost pulled it free, but stopped. Not yet. Instead, she whispered to herself, so soft it was only for her ears. I'm coming. Below, the commander barked orders, rallying the convoy to push forward, reorganizing lines. They thought they were in control again. But she knew better. The valley wasn't done. And neither was she. She slung her rifle, slid back from the ridge, and began to move parallel to them. Not too close, not too far, always unseen. The war below would continue without her name. But the path she walked was older, sharper, and marked by something no commander could erase. Each step she took was one closer to the man who had written her brother's death in fire. And tonight she would begin writing it back. How do you keep walking into the dark when the dark has already taken everything from you? The convoy pushed deeper into the valley, headlights dim, engines grumbling against the incline of broken dirt roads. Soldiers rode silent now, their voices clipped down to murmurs, nerves wound tight from the ambush. She moved parallel, keeping low along the ridges. Every step was its own choice, to stay unseen, to stay outside. Her breath synced with the crunch of gravel beneath her boots. The night carried the sound of crickets, faint wind through brittle grass, and somewhere distant, the echo of gunfire still rolling out of the valley like aftershocks. Her rifle pressed into her shoulder, its weight grounded her. Familiar, honest, steel doesn't lie the way people do. She paused on a slope overlooking the convoy. Soldiers lit only by faint red lamps, their faces streaked with dust and war paint. Some smoked nervously, exhaling clouds that disappeared quick in the wind. Others leaned against vehicles, heads bowed, lips moving silently, prayers or curses, maybe both. The medic, Ortiz, sat on a crate, hands shaking as he pulled out that worn notebook, pencil dragging lines that trembled. Even from a distance, she knew what he was doing, trying to keep alive the faces he had just watched slip away. Her chest tightened. Human fragility looked louder in moments like this. And maybe that's why the past pressed in, uninvited. Her brother's voice again, not in death this time, but alive, laughing. Don't close one eye when you shoot, you'll miss the whole picture. Both eyes open, sis, always. She blinked, and suddenly she wasn't on this ridge anymore. She was 10 years old, lying belly flat in summer grass, a battered .22 cradled awkwardly in her arms. The world smelled of dirt and clover, cicadas buzzing in the heat. Her brother knelt beside her, grinning, sun on his face. He couldn't have been more than 16, but already carried that easy strength that made him look older. He nudged her shoulder. Come on, try again. Her finger pressed the trigger, the recoil soft but startling. The can on the fence didn't move. See, she groaned, I'm terrible. He shook his head, lying down beside her, adjusting her elbows with patience. Not terrible, just too focused on one thing. Open both eyes, see the space around it. That way you'll always know what's coming. She tried. The can blurred at first, but then as she steadied, the picture widened. The grass, the wind, the whole field breathing around her. This time the kin toppled. His laugh was sharp and proud. He whooped so loud their father shouted from the porch to keep it down. That was the first time she'd hit dead center. The first time she'd felt the stillness of perfect aim. The first time she realized she didn't need to be louder than the world to carve her place inside it. The memory broke, replaced by the cold valley night. She crouched lower, pressing her fingers against the dirt to remind herself she was here now. But her brother's voice lingered like smoke. Always both eyes open. The convoy moved again. She followed, shadows stretching thin beneath the stars. Hours passed, the land shifted, the valley narrowed, walls steep on both sides funneling them toward something unseen. She could feel it in her bones, the terrain was too controlled, too deliberate. The enemy knew this place. Her boots whispered across rock. She stopped often, listening, scanning. And that's when she heard it, faint but distinct. Water. Not the trickle of streams, but a steady rush, muffled by distance. A river. She knew this from the maps. A crossing point ahead, shallow but wide, the only path through. And rivers were traps. She hurried to higher ground, crawling the last stretch to a cliff's edge. Below, the convoy rolled to a stop at the water's edge. Soldiers dismounted, eyes sharp, rifles ready. The commander gestured, sending scouts ahead to wade through. But she saw it first. The ripple of movement upstream, shadows slipping low in the reeds, too many, too still. It was waiting for them. Her pulse spiked, but her mind stayed calm. She raised the rifle, scope catching the faint shimmer of moon on weapons tucked where no soldier below could see. Her finger hovered on the trigger, but hesitation caught her, not doubt of her aim, but doubt of her role. Every bullet she fired tied her closer to this mission. Every act of interference made it harder to stay invisible. Would they call it betrayal if they discovered her, or salvation? The sound of boots splashing below forced her choice. She fired. One shadow dropped. The others stirred, startled, scrambling too soon. Soldiers below froze, rifles snapping toward the sound. The valley exploded again in gunfire, bullets streaking across water, sparks on stone. The convoy ducked into defensive formation, shouting, firing back. She picked off what they couldn't see, one by one, her rifle's silent thunder above the chaos. Still the enemy pressed. Ortiz was on the bank, dragging a wounded man back by his vest, his face twisted with effort. Two more soldiers pushed forward into the water, trying to flank. The commander shouted into his radio, calling for support that wouldn't come fast enough. Her scope caught the glint of metal, an RPG raised from the reeds, aimed straight at the trucks. Her finger squeezed before she could breathe. The man crumpled. The rocket slipped harmless into water. Below, soldiers shouted in triumph, relief spilling out raw, but none of them knew who had fired. None of them looked up. The enemy scattered, retreating back into trees, their ambush broken once again. The valley fell into silence broken only by ragged breathing and the rush of water. She lowered her rifle chest tight. 2 ambushes stopped, too, and still no one knew. The convoy began to move again, dragging its wounded, its wheels grinding into mud. The commander's face was iron in the glow of headlights, jaw clenched, eyes hard. She watched him, and for the first time she thought she saw the faintest flicker of confusion, as if he was starting to suspect the night wasn't entirely his to command. But she didn't wait to see more. She slipped back from the ridge, her path already bending away from them, deeper into the valley. Because she couldn't stay only their ghost, she had her own path. And somewhere ahead, past the reeds and rocks and silence, was the man who had stolen her brother's laughter, his guidance, his future. The photograph in her pocket felt heavier than the rifle on her back. She touched it once more, whispering only to herself, "I'm coming for both of us." And then she walked on, the night swallowing her footsteps, the sound of water fatting behind her. She didn't sleep that night, not really, just closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the rain on the metal roof remind her that time was still moving. Every sound felt amplified. The low hum of the generator outside, the shuffle of boots in the mud, the distant cough of a soldier on watch, each reminder that she wasn't alone, yet somehow she had never felt more isolated. The map lay folded on the crate beside her, stained from the number of times she'd traced her finger over the route. They were moving before dawn, a 3-hour march through terrain that was unforgiving even in daylight, mountains that swallowed men whole, valleys where radio signals died, and somewhere out there, waiting, an enemy who had already proven how patient they could be. She tied her boots slower than usual, deliberately, as if prolonging the ritual would somehow make morning wait. It didn't. When the sergeant tapped twice on the doorframe, she stood without hesitation. Her rifle slung across her back felt heavier today, not in weight but in meaning. Every time she carried it, she carried him too, the brother who had never come back. They walked in silence for the first hour. Mud stuck to their boots. Breath hung in the cold air like tiny signals of life. No one wasted words. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in other missions, other marches, other nights. But still, she could feel their unease. Halfway up the ridge, Ramirez stumbled. He swore quietly, brushing dirt from his knees, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. She caught it. Everyone caught it. Fear always showed itself in small ways before it screamed. She slowed just enough to match his pace, her eyes forward, never acknowledging it. That was her way of saying, "I see you. You're not alone." They reached the plateau near midday. The view should have been beautiful, mountains rolling endlessly, peaks cutting into the pale sky, but beauty had no place here. Every shadow was a threat, every silence a trap. They spread out, scanning with trained eyes, listening for what wasn't there. That was when she felt it, a wrongness, like the earth itself was holding its breath. She raised her fist, the signal to freeze. The unit halted instantly, tension rippling down the line. Her finger hovered near the trigger as her eyes searched the ridge across from them. Nothing moved, not a bird, not a leaf. "Talk to me," the sergeant whispered into comms. She didn't answer at first. Couldn't. It wasn't something she could explain in tactical terms. It was instinct, carved into her by years of silence, loss, and the understanding that danger never announced itself politely. Then she saw it, a glint barely there, a reflection where none should exist. "Sniper," she breathed. The shot rang out a second later. The sound cracked the silence like glass shattering. Ramirez dropped, not dead, not yet, but down. The others scattered for cover, rifles up, eyes wide, adrenaline flooding every vein. Her pulse didn't race, it slowed. Focus narrowed until all that existed was the origin of that shot, the ridge, the angle, the mistake the other sniper had made, revealing just enough. She pressed her cheek to the scope. The world shrank into a circle of clarity. Her breath steadied. Inhale, exhale. She found him hidden in rock and shadow, waiting for another chance to kill. Her finger rested on the trigger, but something stopped her. Not hesitation, not fear, memory. Her brother, the last time she saw him. The way he'd told her, half joking, half serious, "Don't let the war turn you into me." She exhaled and with it, let go of everything but the shot. The recoil jolted her shoulder, the echo rolled through the mountains, and then silence. The ridge across from her was still again. No movement, no threat, just the emptiness that always followed. She lowered her rifle slowly, her chest tight, her throat dry. Ramirez groaned, clutching his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him. He would live, this time. The sergeant's voice cracked over comms. "Good eyes, good shot." She didn't respond. Compliments didn't land here, not when someone's blood still soaked the ground. As the medic worked on Ramirez, she sat apart from the others, eyes fixed on the horizon. That's where the next threat would come from. It always did. But deep inside, another battle raged. She had done what she was trained to do, what she had to do. Yet the echo of that rifle shot lingered in her chest longer than it should have. Killing didn't get easier. It only got quieter. And in the quiet, memories had room to grow. She closed her eyes just for a second, and there he was again. Her brother's smile, his hand on her shoulder, his voice softer than she remembered, "Don't let it take you." When she opened them, the mountains looked sharper, colder. They still had miles to go, and something told her the worst hadn't started yet. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the downpour. Each step sank into mud that seemed determined to hold them back. The medic walked at the center, steadying Ramirez, who leaned against him, pale but stubbornly upright. No one complained. No one broke the quiet with needless words. They all felt it, that invisible weight pressing down on them from the ridges above. She walked point, scanning, always scanning. Her eyes never rested in one place too long. Movement could come from anywhere. And yet the greater threat wasn't what they could see. It was what they couldn't. Why hadn't there been more? One sniper alone was rarely the tactic of choice here. It meant something. A signal, a test, or worse, a distraction. Her jaw tightened as she pushed forward, boots striking stone now as the trail wound into narrower cuts of rock. The canyon walls rose on either side, closing them in. Every instinct screamed against it. Traps were made for places like this. The sergeant came up beside her. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the stone around them. "You feel it too." She gave the smallest nod. "We're not walking into nothing." He studied her face for a moment, then looked back at the men trailing behind. "Keep them steady. You see it first, you call it." She wanted to answer, but the words caught. What if I do? What if I miss it? What if Ramirez is just the first name in a list we'll never finish reading? Her breath came slower. She forced the thought down. Doubt had no place in her hands, not when they held the rifle. A sound cut through the canyon. Not a gunshot, not an explosion, something worse. A child's cry. Every man froze. Heads turned, scanning the walls, the shadows. The sound echoed, distorted by stone, impossible to place. She felt her chest tighten. No, not here, not this way. "Keep moving," the sergeant ordered, voice like iron. "Don't engage." But the cry came again, closer this time. Fragile, human. Her feet stopped. Against every command drilled into her, she stopped. She searched the ridge above, and then she saw it. A figure small against the rock, maybe 8 years old, barefoot, clutching something to his chest. A bundle wrapped in cloth. The men muttered, uneasy. Ramirez cursed under his breath. Her finger itched on the trigger, not to shoot, to steady herself. Because this was the choice the war kept throwing at her. Kill or save, trust or doubt, humanity or survival. The boy lifted the bundle higher, his thin arms trembling. And in that instant she knew. It wasn't a child's cry she'd heard. It was bait, a recording. "Cover," she shouted. The explosion tore through the ridge a heartbeat later. Rock rained down. Dust swallowed the canyon in choking clouds. Shrapnel screamed against stone. She hit the ground hard, ears ringing, lungs clawing for air. Somewhere to her right, someone screamed. Not the fake cry of a recording, this one was real. Her hands shook as she dragged herself behind a boulder, coughing, blinking through the haze. Shapes moved in the dust. Dark. Quick. The enemy pouring down from the ridge like shadows breaking free from the stone itself. The fight came fast, too fast. Bullets snapped through the air, sparking against rock. Men shouted, returning fire. Ramirez groaned, pinned where he fell, blood soaking fresh into his sleeve. She pressed her cheek to the stock of her rifle, eyes burning as she tried to find clarity in chaos. And she did. She always did. Targets revealed themselves. Her breath slowed. Her world shrank again to that narrow scope where decisions were measured in fractions of seconds. One shot, another, each one meant someone else wouldn't get back up, and still the enemy came. Beside her, the sergeant fired with brutal precision, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might break. He glanced her way once, eyes meeting hers through the dust. A wordless exchange. We hold here, we don't break. But she felt it again, the voice in her memory, her brother, don't let it take you. It was too late, it already had. When the dust began to thin, when the echoes of the ambush faded, when silence finally returned to the canyon, there were fewer of them standing. She lowered her rifle with hands that trembled now. Her throat burned with dust and guilt. Two men lay still where they had fallen. Ramirez was alive, barely. And the others, they wore the hollow look she knew too well, survivors' eyes. The sergeant's voice was low when he finally spoke. They knew we'd come this way. Someone fed them our route. Her chest went cold. A betrayal, from inside or from somewhere close enough to matter. She swallowed hard, her voice rough. Then it's not just the enemy out there, it's someone with us. The words hung in the air like poison. No one answered. No one wanted to. She turned her gaze back to the ridge, to the place where the boy had stood holding that bundle. There was nothing there now, just silence, but she couldn't unsee it, couldn't unhear it. The war had stolen many things from her. But this, using innocence as a weapon, twisting trust into a blade, that cut deeper than any wound she could treat. And as they lifted the wounded and gathered their dead, she felt it settle heavy in her chest. This mission wasn't just survival anymore. It was truth. And truth had a way of demanding a price no one was ready to pay. The march after the ambush was a march of ghosts. Boots scraped against stone, heavy and uneven, carrying more weight than they had at dawn. No one spoke. Not about the two who would never walk again. Not about Ramirez, whose steps faltered with every 100 meters. And not about the truth that had slipped like a knife into their circle. Someone had given them up. She felt it with every glance. The eyes of the others. Suspicion hung heavier than the mountain air. It didn't matter that she had spotted the sniper first, or that her warning had saved half of them when the blast came. In silence, doubt became its own kind of enemy. Her rifle was steady on her back, but her chest was. She walked with discipline, yes, but inside, a storm twisted. If there's a traitor, if it's someone we trust, then everything we've bled for is already broken. Night fell before they found shelter. A hollow carved into the mountain, wide enough to hold them but narrow enough to feel suffocating. They set no fire. The darkness was their only shield now. She sat at the edge, rifle across her knees, eyes on the mouth of the cave. But her ears tuned backward into the shadows behind her. Voices hushed. The kind that carried things words alone couldn't say. Fear, anger, blame. Ramirez groaned in pain, his voice frayed. We shouldn't have made it through that canyon. We shouldn't have made it unless. Silence followed, a silence sharper than any accusation. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to shut it down, to tell him he was delirious from blood loss. But part of her knew he was only saying what everyone else was already thinking. The sergeant's voice came, gravel-thick, controlled. Enough. We don't turn on each other, not here, not now. But discipline couldn't mask what lingered in their eyes. When the others finally drifted into restless sleep, she stayed awake, watching the ridge, the sky, the shadows. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind wouldn't let go. Every detail of the last 24 hours replayed, where they had walked, who had lingered near the radio, who had looked away too quickly when the ambush came. Her breath caught when the thought finally sharpened. What if it isn't just someone among us? What if it's someone waiting at the end? The mission's destination, the outpost they were ordered to secure, suddenly felt like a noose tightening. She closed her eyes, pressing her palms into the dirt until it bit her skin. She thought of her brother then, unbidden. The letter he had written her before his last deployment, folded and refolded until the paper nearly tore. If the war takes me, promise me you'll find out why. Don't let it just be another silence. Now she wondered if this was the silence he had meant. Not the firefights, not the explosions, but the betrayal that eats you from the inside, turning brothers into strangers. At dawn, they moved again. Their path took them through valleys etched with scars, burned trees, shattered stone, the smell of war that never really left. She led point, as always, her eyes drinking in every detail, searching not just for threats, but for truth. The sergeant fell in step beside her. His voice was low. "You don't believe it either, do you?" She didn't answer right away. The mountains demanded silence. But finally she spoke. "I believe someone wants us gone, and they knew exactly where we'd be." He nodded, jaw set. "That means it doesn't end with the ridge. It follows us, until we stop it." She looked at him then, really looked. A man carrying more than his share of ghosts. And she wondered, did he trust her, or was she part of the doubt too? A crack echoed across the valley. Not gunfire, not this time, just a rock slide in the distance. But every man flinched. That was what betrayal did. It made the earth itself feel like an enemy. Hours later, they reached the final rise before the outpost. The sun cut sharp across the horizon, painting the world in gold that felt cruel in its beauty. And there it was, the compound. Concrete walls, barbed wire, antennas rising like skeletal fingers. Relief should have come, safety, the knowledge that the march was over. But as they stood there, staring down at the place they were meant to call secure, no one moved. Because something was wrong, too quiet, no movement on the walls, no signal from within, just silence waiting. Her heart slammed once hard. She gripped her rifle tighter, the weight of her brother's last words pressing against her ribs. Don't let it just be another silence. And she knew, with every fiber of her being, whatever waited inside that compound would either break them, or finally reveal the truth that had been stalking them all along. The compound loomed like a shadow carved from stone and steel. Walls weathered by years of neglect, antennas bent against the wind, gates standing half open as if daring them to enter. It should have been alive with the rhythm of soldiers, footsteps, radios, the faint hum of machinery. But there was nothing. No smoke, no voices, just silence. Her boots paused on the rise. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't victory. It was invitation. Behind her, the men shifted uneasily, their breaths heavy from the climb. Ramirez leaned against another's shoulder, pale, yet stubbornly refusing to stop. The sergeant raised a hand for quiet, though none of them had spoken. They all felt it. "Scouts first," he whispered, his voice brittle against the wind. But she stepped forward before anyone else could move. Her rifle was steady in her hands, though her chest was a battlefield of its own. "If it's a trap, let it be mine. If it's truth, I'll carry it." The gates creaked as she pushed them wider, the sound far too loud in the emptiness. Dust swirled at her feet. Inside, the yard was deserted. Vehicles rusted where they had been abandoned. A flagpole leaned without a flag. She moved slowly, eyes sweeping, rifle raised. Every corner seemed to hold a shadow that might move. Every silence felt like a held breath. The others followed, weapons up, nerves strung so tight the smallest sound could snap them. They reached the central building, doors ajar, glass shattered, bullet holes stitched across concrete walls. She caught the faintest trace of something, burned fabric, iron, old smoke. The sergeant gave a sharp nod. They entered. Inside, the air was heavy, stale. Papers scattered across the floor, maps torn from the walls, a chair overturned, a radio smashed to pieces. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just abandonment. This was cleansing, erasure. And then she saw it, carved into the table at the center, deep grooves etched by a knife. Traitor. The word cut through her more deeply than the ambush had, because it meant what they feared wasn't suspicion anymore. It was truth. The men muttered, shifting, their eyes darting toward one another. Fear turned inward now, sharp and dangerous. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. Don't let it take you. Don't let the war hollow you out. Her brother's voice again. A memory, but so close it felt alive. When she opened her eyes, her gaze fell to the far wall. A board still half-pinned with photographs. Faces. Soldiers, locals, notes scribbled in haste. She stepped closer, brushing dust from one, and her chest clenched. Her brother's face stared back at her. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet, his name written beneath in faded ink, and next to it, red paint slashed across, one word beside it: silence. Her knees almost buckled, her breath tore shallow. He hadn't just died on some nameless mission. He had been marked, branded. His end wasn't chaos, it was choice. Someone had decided it. The sergeant's voice came behind her, low, careful. You knew him. She couldn't answer, not with words, only with the grip tightening on her rifle, her knuckles white. The others shifted again, whispered, the tension building, spiraling. And then footsteps from deeper in the building, slow, deliberate. Every rifle swung toward the sound. From the shadows, a figure emerged. A man in uniform, but not theirs. His face was lined, his beard grayed, his eyes cold and steady. He walked with the calm of someone who knew he held the truth. You weren't supposed to come, he said, his voice echoing against the hollow walls. The sergeant stepped forward, rifle up. Who the hell are you? The man's gaze shifted past him, straight to her. The sister, of course. Her heart stopped. Heat surged through her veins, sharp as fire. He smiled faintly, cruelly. Your brother made the same mistake, believing he could fix what was already broken. He didn't stay silent, that's why he bled. Her breath shattered. The walls pressed closer. Every sound fell away until only his words remained. Her brother, killed not by chance, not by war, but because he refused to play along. The sergeant's voice was tight, demanding. Who fed them our route? Who sold us out? The man shrugged, almost casual. Does it matter? You're already standing in a grave. Gunfire exploded before he could say more. From the windows, from the rooftops, shadows rising, rifles flashing. The compound lit alive with violence. She dropped to cover, heart hammering, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Her world narrowed again. Targets, angles, survival, but beneath it all a deeper current surged, rage. She fought like the storm she had held back for years. Every shot a refusal to let silence win. Every breath a promise to the brother whose voice had carried her this far. The others fought too, desperate, fierce, back to back, holding ground inch by inch. Ramirez, bleeding but unbroken, fired until his hands shook. The sergeant barked orders, his voice steady even as the walls splintered around them. And then through the smoke, through the chaos, she saw him again. The man with the gray beard, standing calm amid the storm as if he knew bullets would not touch him. Her chest burned, her throat tightened. She raised her rifle, breath steadying despite the firestorm around her. This wasn't just another target. This was the thread that tied her brother's silence, the betrayal, the ambush, all of it. She exhaled slowly. Her finger squeezed. The shot cracked, the man fell. The compound seemed to shudder with it, as if something had finally broken loose. The firefight waned after that. The remaining shadows scattered, retreating into the hills, leaving behind silence once more. She stood in the wreckage, her rifle heavy, her chest hollow. Around her, the survivors breathed hard, eyes wild, faces streaked with sweat and blood. But her gaze stayed fixed on the man's body. The truth lay there, lifeless. And yet it didn't bring her peace. Only the weight of knowing her brother's death wasn't nameless anymore. It was chosen. The sergeant placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, grounding. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She lowered her rifle slowly, her breath trembling. Outside, dawn began to break again. Light spilling over mountains scarred by war, painting them in colors too soft for the brutality they had seen. She stepped into that light, her boots heavy, her soul heavier. And in that quiet she whispered, not to the men, not to the sergeant, but to him, her brother. "I won't let it take me." The wind carried the words away, soft and fragile, but she knew he heard, somewhere. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in the silence of the mountains, her choice lingered, an echo, a promise, a final act of resilience carved not in blood, but in the strength to keep walking forward.